We hope you like this album, especially produced for
the True Tunes podcast.
Included are some selections by some old friends of yours and mine, music we thought would be appropriate for leisurely moments. Some of the music is upbeat, some of it is contemporary, and we think all of it will be good listening.
Hello, I'm John J. Thompson, and on this episode of the True Tunes podcast, we are excited to be talking with a singer and songwriter who first came to our attention a few years ago and recently seems to be turning heads all over the place. Taylor Leonhardt has an inviting, youthful, lightly Americana-inflected sound with a sophisticated compositional nature and an invitational presence in both her vocal presentation and her lyrical approach. She's a strong player, a deep thinker, and, as you'll soon hear, a wonderful conversationalist. Taylor has a new album coming this summer, and she's giving us a sneak preview of one of the songs on this episode. After a year of both unexpected delays and challenges, as well as opportunities and open doors, her new project finds her settling deeper into her Americana roots with a supporting cast of world-class musicians bringing the songs to life. I'm so excited that we get to be among the first places you will hear one of these incredible new songs. She has even arranged a special acoustic performance for us. So, if you're not already a Taylor Leonhardt fan, prepare to become one pretty darn fast.
I feel the earth move under my feet. I feel the sky tumbling down. I feel my heart start to trembling whenever you're around.
On the Jukebox, we will give you a taste of a special Spotify playlist curated by Taylor, which includes several of her musical influences, including a specific look at a few artists that loom over this community in the loveliest of ways. Carole King, Emmylou Harris, Patty Griffin, as well as that album from Alison Krauss and Robert Plant. You're going to dig this one, I promise. Before we dive in, I want to welcome our many new listeners. Although I can't see anything specific about who you all are unless you reach out, I know we had many more downloads in the last month than ever before, and from all around the world. Do make sure to head over to truetunes.com and subscribe to our email list to stay informed about new episodes and become eligible for giveaways and things like that. You should also like and follow us on Facebook at True Tunes Now. You can also follow me on Twitter at John J. Thompson, and on Instagram, I'm at TheOnlyJJT and at True Tunes Music. And speaking of giveaways, we are currently working on our biggest one yet. It will include a massive pile of stuff, including a DVD copy of the super rare Cornerstone Festival 20 Years and Counting film that I wrote and directed nearly 20 years ago, a copy of my book, Jesus, Bread, and Chocolate, some fresh new vinyl and CDs from Girder Records and Retroactive, some great swag from the Electric Jesus film, and a ticket to either the White Owl Festival coming up here in the Nashville area this Memorial Day weekend, and at which today's guest will be featured, or the Audio Feed Music Festival in Illinois Labor Day weekend. You have to be subscribed to the email list to win, so do that right now before you forget. Oh, and your reviews and ratings at Apple Podcast are much appreciated as well. Please continue to spread the word about the show. We sure appreciate it. I also want to invite you to keep your eyes open for the Electric Jesus podcast, a backstage pass into the music behind the movie and the movie behind the music that so many people are talking about. It's a special new series being put together by, well, us. Bruce A. Brown and myself, aka Gyroscope Productions, the same brain trust behind this True Tunes podcast, are partnering with Blue Tape Records to bring a special new podcast to life. Watch our page for all the info and make sure to follow electricjesusfilm.com for some very exciting news about the 80s hair band music comedy you've been saving yourself for. I also want to thank our partners at visiontrust.org. This world is a dangerous place for far too many children. Poverty and disease prevent millions of precious ones from thriving and becoming the blessings to the world that we believe they are designed to be. Vision Trust comes alongside these young ones by partnering with local heroes around the globe to provide health, education, spiritual development, and community development targeted to help these children and their families. For $40 a month, you can absolutely change the world for one child. You can find the link at truetunes.com or go to visiontrust.org and tell them we sent you. If you do sponsor a child, please drop me a line and let me know. Thank you very much. All right, now on with the show. Taylor Leonhardt is in the middle of a very busy season. You may have seen her playing guitar in Amy Grant's band alongside Ellie Holcomb and some other amazing women when they played on Good Morning America from the Ryman Auditorium recently. She made her own Ryman debut as well when she performed as part of Andrew Peterson's Resurrection Letters Easter Monday live stream event from that hallowed stage. She's also putting, as I said, the finishing touches on her new album, so we truly appreciate her taking time out of her schedule to hang out with us. Safely distanced, of course, we set up in the front room of my own home here in East Nashville and started the recorder running.
Last night I bought a lie. I saw an ad online. All these smiling people had it figured out. If I could be someone else, someone beside myself, I might have a little less to cry about. I'm on the other side of the glass, looking at the life they had. Ain't it so much better? It's always easier to believe it's easy for them to be happy or whatever.
Thank you for being here with us on the True Tunes podcast. It's really great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks for coming here to the house. It's great to have somebody back in our home. We've been doing these on screens for so long. It's nice to actually talk to somebody in person.
And you're my neighbor, so
that's right.
It was a short commute.
You're
today.
A new East Nashville resident.
Yes.
I want to hear a little bit about your background, your childhood. Let's hear about the origin story of Taylor.
I'm 32 years old, so I was born in 1988 in Beaumont, Texas, and kind of like East Texas. But I grew up for the kind of first part of my life in Houston, and then we moved when I was in middle school to a little town called New Braunfels, Texas.
Oh, I know New Braunfels.
Yeah, so that's where I spent middle school and high school. And so we moved there. I'm in 7th grade. My brother's in 4th grade. It's a beautiful town. It's a beautiful place to grow up. And I was such a city kid before that. And now I feel like New Braunfels really turned me into like a kind of a small town
Now,
girl.
Did you happen to, were you aware of Lee Nash or Sixpence None the Richer all? Because that's the same town they came from.
Oh, it is. Yes. In fact, so they're local legends for sure. And I grew up listening to Sixpence None the Richer like most of my peers. And we went to the same high school.
Oh.
She went to my high school some years before me. And so, that was kind of one of our little claims to fame. And also the high school mascot at New Braunfels High School is the unicorn. So I think it's one of the only high schools in the world that has a unicorn mascot. So Lee and I were both unicorns, and I feel like that forever probably will bond us. In fact, I got to meet Lee at a writer's round a few years ago, 2 years ago, and I said, hey, actually, like, we grew up in the same town. It's so nice to meet you, finally. And she said, were you a unicorn? And I said, I was. So, that is a kind of a fun little thing that we share.
Come, ye thankful people, come, raise the song of harvest home. All is safely gathered in.
Did you feel like the music of Texas had an influence? Were you listening to the sound of that part of the country? Did that kind of feed into you creatively?
Yeah, Texas music is definitely its own thing. I think, you could kind of look at it from 1,000 feet away and go, this sounds like country, but it's really its own brand of that, and it has its own DNA to me. And so there's people like Guy Clark, and then you have like even kind of a little bit more country sounding like Pat Green. And that's definitely the stuff that I listened to growing up. In fact, really, I was listening a lot to oldies music growing up. So my dad would play Hank Williams, Patsy Cline, George Jones, Tammy Wynette. He loved that kind of country. And so we didn't listen to like pop songs on the radio really in the car. My parents kept a very firm hand on the radio dial. So we're listening to what they want to listen to. But I think it's great because I got this education in kind of old country and and just oldies in general. So I grew up really listening to 60s and 70s singer-songwriters and like Carole King, and kind of I just knew that world, and that's what I thought music was. And my dad also probably mixed in there is a lot of Creedence Clearwater Revival and the Eagles and that kind of thing. And so of course I get into high school and start listening to pop music and have that kind of going on. But I remember this was probably a turning point in my life was when I watched the movie Elizabethtown, which is like a Cameron Crowe film.
Right.
And the soundtrack just kind of took my breath away. And there's one song in particular in that film, which is Patty Griffin's Long Ride Home. And before that point, so I'm in high school, I've never heard of Patty Griffin. She's been around, but I just haven't been introduced to her stuff yet. But I hear this song, and it just finds me, you know, the way a song will do. And it finds my heart, and I think, whoever this woman is, I'm zeroing in. So I probably got every album and just devoured it and became overnight really like the biggest Patty Griffin fan. Didn't know what she looked like for a while. So now when I went back and watched Elizabethtown again, I realized, she actually makes a cameo in that movie. She's speaking at the funeral, and I thought, oh wait, she was there. I didn't even know. So, and that really opened me up into this whole world of Patty Griffin, Emmylou Harris, these powerful women Americana songwriters that I thought I wasn't writing those kinds of songs yet. I don't even think at that point I knew I wanted to write music, but I felt like it imprinted on me, you know, and left this kind of indelible mark on my soul that would be what I would return to later.
There goes the screen door slamming shut. You better do what you're told. When I get back, this room better be picked up. Car wheels on a gravel road. Car wheels on a gravel road.
Do you remember when you did first start thinking that writing and performing music was going to be really important to you?
Well, I learned to play guitar. My dad taught me, and he had his college guitar kind of in the closet. And something he likes doing in the evenings, he comes home from work and would get the guitar out of the closet, and the strings, I just remember this guitar like it was beat up and the strings hadn't been changed in probably who knows how long. But he'd just play, and he'd kind of play these two or three songs just over and over again, and I loved listening to him play and sing. And so I think it just occurred to me one day sitting there, I think I want to play. I want to be able to do that, what he's doing. And so I just asked him to show me, a couple chords, and he did. And just started this insatiable thing with me kind of playing music. And I ended up teaching, my dad kind of showed me a couple things, and then I really took it from there. And I did take lessons at some point, but I was the kid sort of trying on lots of different activities. They put me in softball and Girl Scouts and all this stuff, and I'd always be like, I don't know, it's not my thing, and I'm not great at sports. But once I found the guitar and kind of started singing these songs I loved, man, I felt like I could never get enough of that. And then it really was just that. And then, in high school, I would play at youth group or play at Young Life or something like that, these kind of little organizations and clubs I was a part of. And then it was probably the end of high school, getting into college, when I kind of was like, okay, I'm starting to listen to these storytellers like Patty, like Emmylou, like John Prine, and I'm like, I want to tell a story. And so I would do that, and a lot of times it would be sort of about somebody else, or like I had a friend whose parents were getting a divorce, and I remember just feeling the pain of that for her, and feeling like, what would I want to say to this friend, feeling like words were not enough, like I could write her a note or I could call her on the phone, but I felt like it's somehow not communicating what I really want this friend of mine to know. And so I wrote a song and somehow experienced that mystery of what happens when you take poetry really and lyric and melody, and somehow you're able to say way more than you can say with just, I love you, I'm here for you.
Right.
And so, man, I kind of got addicted to it at that point, and I thought communication is so important to me, and words and language and connection with people. And I thought, here's my avenue to do that. You know, here's something I love, which is music and rhythm and lyrics and melody, and what I can actually use that to, you know, connect with people I love. It's a long road that we are walking on, and we were not made to go alone. Sister, you don't have to be so strong. If you want me to, I will come along.
You mentioned that you had groups.
Yeah.
So whether it was a youth group or a young life or something,
Yeah.
or you had friends that going through certain things. So you had inspiration to write about certain things. You had an audience to play for. And it's interesting how that can really shape how we evolve early on as creative people, because so much of what our instinct is to serve a need, but also to have an audience. It's interesting how we evolve by both the audience that's there for us and the inspiration and need that's there, and if we're listening for it. It seemed like you had a good combination of those things, and you're saying you got good feedback from the people around you that valued what you were doing as well.
Totally. I think that's actually a great point that I don't know that I've considered that, and think about how even my creativity and music was being poured into a container, and this is the particular container that gave it its shape in that time. I think that can even change over the years, and you find yourselves in different environments in a different container. But definitely, I think, you know, there's this kind of, I don't know if people when they think of artists or songwriters, sometimes I think they think it's all about self-expression. It's all about, what do I have to say to the world?
Right.
Actually, it's not just, what do I want to say, and now I'm saying it. It's what I want to jump into a conversation that's already happening. So much of it is listening to what's already, like, who's around you, what's being said, and then jumping into that conversation. So to think that you can kind of create in a vacuum, and it's all about what you want and what you think, is, I think you're missing the bigger picture there of, we're shaped and really like serving the people around us. And I would, you know, argue that I couldn't write music if I wasn't in those places, in those containers. I want to have the conversation, you know, and I want to learn, and I'm very curious. I think, you know, and that serves you well as any kind of artist. The empty filled, the wounded healed, the broken back together. Poor are blessed, the weary rest. We will dance forever. The blinded see, the chained are free. The doubtful now believer, the outcast known, the orphan home. You are my redeemer. Behold, behold, behold what love can do. Behold, behold, he's making all things new.
At what point did you start to realize, you know what, this is going to be my life? And what did you do to start to make that happen?
Oh, man. I never was the kid growing up who thought, like, if you ask my parents, I don't think they would have said, oh, she dreamed about being a singer-songwriter, or this wasn't the vision I had as a kid. I don't think I had figured that out yet, and was sort of trying my hand at lots of things. But I went to college and got a psychology degree, and really thought, you know, music was something I loved. I didn't see it. I was kind of in that zone where I thought, I love doing this. I feel like I can do it in these environments. I can sing at church, whatever, and enjoy that. But I don't need to. That's probably I'll write songs in my spare time. And what a fun hobby to have. I was kind of in that world. But I get this psych degree, and I kind of pursue jobs in social work. I tried that for a while, and I was working for a nonprofit, and then I think, no, I was working with kids at this nonprofit, so I think maybe I should be a teacher. I really like working with these kids, and I've always liked reading, and I had some idea that that's all that being a teacher is. You get to read fun books with kids, and there's a lot more to it, turns out. So I kind of go down that road of being a teacher a little bit, and that doesn't really, and it was somewhere in the midst of that, I really felt my heart and my soul kind of trying to find, what is my work in the world? What's mine here to do? All the meanwhile, I'm writing songs, and I'm listening to people's stories, and I'm responding to them with these songs, and listening to my own story even at this point, and writing. And it's just something that I never stopped doing. It felt natural to me, in a sense, like breathing. And so this one day, a family that I knew, they had gone to something called a house concert, which I know you're very familiar with. At the time, I was not. I was like, what is a house concert? And they say, we went to this house concert, and there's this guy with this guitar, and he's just singing songs, and it was beautiful. Like, the living room was full, and the kitchen table was like, covered in food, and so people were just together and enjoying music in this really intimate, beautiful way. And they had gone to this house concert and just loved it. And so these wonderful friends of mine said, we want to have a house concert, and we thought, who do we know that writes songs? And so we thought of you, and we were wondering if you wanted to come play your songs. And I remember being like, oh man. At this point, I had done, covered like coffee shop gigs, and like I said, singing at church, that kind of thing. But I never really performed songs I'd written, like where this is my show, and so I'm kind of shaking in my boots, but at the same time, I feel this deep kind of invitation to say yes to that. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. And this living room was filled with probably 60, 70 people, kind of spilling into the kitchen and outside. And here I am, like, singing all my songs I've ever written, because no one had ever really taught me at this point how to build a set list. So I'm like, I guess I just sing all the songs. So I just sang them all and told stories, and felt like something shifted in me that night. And I think it was that conversation piece, because I'd been writing songs in my room and enjoying that, and sometimes sharing those with friends. But here I was with a group of people, and it felt like magic, and it felt like I felt people responding to what I was doing. And it wasn't even so much about applause or great job, although, I'm a human being. Of course, I need that kind of stuff too. But it was more about the story that I felt like we were telling together. So that night, I kind of have this almost like holy experience, and I just know. I think there was a knowing that kind of almost settled on me that night of, I think this is what I want to do with my life. Now, do I know how to do that, or what the next step is? No. And am I scared to tell people? Yes. But I also just knew I have got to keep walking toward this. This isn't what I signed up for, not the life that I imagined. There's a happily ever after. It's never gonna happen. I see the smoke, I feel the burn. That vision's gone up in a blaze. All that's left is you and me, and I can hear you say, don't be afraid, I've redeemed you. I call you by name, beloved, I see you. And when the flames grow even higher, I'll go with you.
it's interesting because, again, the opportunity and the space, that makes sense hearing that your formative experience wasn't a club or a opening gig for a big artist or what, it was a house show, because that immediacy and intimacy is so baked into the sound of your songs. Now, compositionally, you're an accomplished guitar player. First time I heard you, I thought, this young woman has definitely developed some skills. So what inspired you, and what were you listening to? How were you developing such abilities as a musician? What kind of bar were you holding up for yourself? How was that happening? Because you definitely were functioning at a higher level than many.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I think I didn't go to music school, and sometimes I regret that, or sometimes I wonder if I would have made a different choice if I had kind of caught a vision for the life I would lead like earlier. But so I don't know music theory very well. When people talk music theory, I get lost quickly. It feels more like I learned a language from living in the country and from listening. And I certainly did a lot of that. And I think I always, maybe it was like that curiosity mixed with desire and all that. But when I would listen to, even in high school, I remember listening to a lot of John Mayer, who's a fantastic guitar player. And I would just go, okay, well, I want to play the song. I'm going to look up how he plays it. And there wasn't even really YouTube at that point. I think YouTube hit when I was in college. So in high school, I just looked up a lot of, tabs and would listen to the songs and just go read the tabs and kind of go, okay, I'm trying to. And so I think really just so much of it is probably like, if there was a tool I developed, it was probably just my ear for going like, what's happening? And, sometimes I would even notice like, oh, this tab is wrong. And I would make, I'd make my own thing. So I'm like, I'm listening and this is not the same thing. And so just kind of like getting really, and it just felt so fun to me. I think, even when you're talking about like physical exercise, like where you develop strength is kind of in that tension. So I did have this wonderful guitar teacher for about a year, my freshman year of high school, and he would make me learn songs that felt so hard to play. So this is early on in my playing, and he made me learn Blackbird, which, with my skill where it was at the time, he just would go, no, you can play this, and would make me play it to the metronome and kind of like make me listen and go, okay, now figure this out. And I think having someone even go, you're capable of more than what you're doing right now is really a powerful thing in my life. And I feel that if you're, whether you're talking about guitar playing or even songwriting, like listening to people who are much better than you, and if you're lucky, maybe having someone like that saying, hey, I actually think that you're capable of this. Then you also get to do something fun as an artist or a musician, is you get to find out your style and kind of settle into that and go, oh, there's a particular way I think that I play in a pocket, and there's things that I emphasize, and I know that it's not always what everyone's looking for, but it's totally me. I ended up living in North Carolina for almost a decade. Kind of left Texas after high school and found my way there. Did this kind of 1-year internship in North Carolina, and then thought, I'll find my spot after that. And but it turns out that was my spot for a while. It was Raleigh, North Carolina, which is kind of over there by Chapel Hill. It's like 2 hours from the coast. And two other very significant people in my life were also living in Raleigh at the time, and one of those people was Krista Wells, who's been on the podcast before.
Friend of ours,
she is now my big sister. And when I was, we talked about this moment where I thought, okay, I want to do music. I'm walking down this road, and one of the first people I met after saying that was Krista Wells. A mutual friend connected us and said, you've got to meet this woman, Krista. She's an amazing award-winning songwriter. She lives right here. She's got a ton of kids, but someone that you should spend time with. And if you spend any time with Krista, you'll realize she's one of the most gracious humans on the planet and has such a heart for younger people and kind of just pulling people along with her. And I was fortunate to be the recipient of that. And she just right away, I felt looked for so many opportunities to teach me, to help me. She'd say, hey, come play guitar with me on this gig I have, or hey, I'm speaking about songwriting at this thing and I need help with the merch tape. I don't know if how much help she really needed, but she'd find all these great excuses to kind of have me around. And so she introduced me to who would later become my bandmate and one of my best friends, Jess Ray, because she's just one of those connectors. So then I have these two musical friends. I end up living in North Carolina for almost 10 years, and that's kind of the place where I write all these songs for River House. And North Carolina feels like the place where if I caught the vision for being a songwriter and then really just said, okay, I'm going to hunker down and try to get better at this thing, and learn so much there.
We're going to step away from the conversation for just a bit to crank up the True Tunes jukebox. We've been dropping lots of names and throwing around quite a few musical references here on this episode, so I asked Taylor if she would help curate a special Spotify playlist in much the same way we did with Phil Madeira and Buddy Miller. She agreed, and the resulting list is linked in the show notes page for this episode. For this segment, we have loaded up the jukebox with 4 albums from her list that have not only spoken into Taylor's journey, but have hovered over the True Tunes story in deep and important ways. So I'm going to drop this Susan B. Anthony dollar in the machine here and see what happens.
And it's too late, baby, now it's too late. Though we really did try to make it. Something inside has died, and I can't hide, and I just can't fake it. Oh, no.
There's really no overstating how massive and influential Carole King's 1971 album Tapestry was. Already an incredibly successful writer of hit songs for other artists, Tapestry presented King as the unassuming and unadorned artist the world needed. From the way her compositions moved from piano-driven rock to brill-building classic pop to epic folk, to the way her thoughtful and vulnerable lyrics swung from celebratory swagger to deeply personal regret, it all formed, yes, a tapestry that refused cliches and led with empathy. And despite King's less than showy voice and the album's simple presentation, it exploded in the hearts and minds of listeners both then and in the half-century since its release. Tapestry has sold more than 14 million copies, landed on too many critics' lists to count, and continues to be cited by artists as one of the most important singer-songwriter albums ever. In my opinion, it is one of the 10 or 20 albums every songwriter should absolutely study if they are serious about understanding the craft.
You just call out my name, and you know wherever I am, I'll come running to see you again. Winter, spring, summer, or fall, all you have to do is call. there, you've got a friend.
Emmylou Harris had long been a darling on the fringes of the country music scene before Daniel Lanois began working with her in 1995. Of course, Harris's name will forever be firmly intertwined with her mentor and friend Graham Parsons. As a member of both the Byrds and the Flying Burrito Brothers, as well as a solo artist, Parsons is credited as one of the architects of the cosmic country sound that still informs modern Americana music in a big way.
So we let the flame burn once again until the thrill is gone. Then we'll sweep out the ashes in the morning.
Back then, Parsons welcomed artists like the Rolling Stones into the twang and laid a foundation for later artists like Linda Ronstadt and the Eagles to build upon. But when he died so young, Harris continued as a paragon of roots country, even as the genre evolved and changed throughout the 80s. When Harris connected with producer Daniel Lanois in the mid-90s, however, she transformed from being a symbol of Americana's past to an ambassador of its present popularity. Lanois, best known for his work with Peter Gabriel, U2, and Bob Dylan, brought an ambient edge to Harris's sound that drew attention to her ethereal voice and the spiritual essence of her artistry. Her voice danced and shimmered, and the album soared, breathing new life not only into Harris's career and legacy, but into the emerging Americana genre as a whole.
Sunburned hot, it burned my eyes, burned so hot I thought I'd died and gone to hell, looking for the water from a deeper well. I went to the river, but the river was dry. I fell to my knees and I looked to the sky, and the spring rain fell. I saw the water from a deeper well.
Patty Griffin has one of those voices that just cuts through whatever track it is placed in and challenges the listener to consider it carefully. It took her a few albums to settle into who she really wanted to be and to extricate herself from contracts with companies that were intent on shaping her into the next this or that. But by the time she emerged with the 1000 Kisses album in 2002, Griffin was a seasoned writer in possession of a uniquely graceful and focused vocal instrument.
People steal, they cheat and lie for wealth and worth it will buy. But don't they know on Judgment Day gold and silver will melt away? I'd rather be in a deep dark grave and know that my first soul was saved than to live in this world in a house of gold.
She would go on to win a Grammy Award in 2010 for her Buddy Miller-produced roots gospel album Downtown Church, and again in 2019 for her self-titled folk album. For many, though, the real eye-opener came with that 2002 album 1000 Kisses, and especially the song Long Ride Home, which got extra attention via the soundtrack to Cameron Crowe's Elizabethtown.
40 years go by with someone laying in your bed. 40 years of things you say you wish you'd never said. How hard would it have been to say some kinder words instead? I wonder as I stare up at the sky turning red. I've had some time to think about, and I watch the sun sink like a stone. I've had some time to think about you all along.
If there was a stop the presses moment in the music scene of 2007, it was the unexpected and breathtaking T-Bone Burnett-produced collaboration between classic rock monster Robert Plant and bluegrass Americana angel Alison Krauss. Their album, Raising Sand, was one of those rare planetary alignments, with the trio choosing an incredible batch of songs, Plant and Krause performing at the absolute height of their powers, and it all being captured in sonic clarity, simplicity, and perfection.
Some sunny day, baby, when everything seems okay, baby, you wake up and find that you're alone, 'cause I'll be gone.
As the era of digital music and hyped-up pop ravaged the airwaves and earbuds of the world, this devastatingly quiet and relentlessly analog album sold millions of copies, swept the Grammy Awards, and recalibrated millions of people's heads and hearts, at least for a moment or two. The delicate Sister Rosetta Goes Before Us, written by Sam Phillips, paid long overdue homage to Sister Rosetta Tharpe, the electric guitar rocking, gospel singing African-American pioneer who would probably have been credited as the inventor of rock and roll, not to mention gospel rock, if not for her sex and color.
Strange things are happening every day. I hear the music up above my head, though the side of my heart has left me again. I hear music up above. Secrets are written in the sky. Looks like I've lost the love I've never found. Though the sound of hope has left me again, I hear music up above.
There's a lot more on the playlist, including John Prine, Guy Clark, Bob Dylan, Patsy Cline, Sandra McCracken, Billy Joel, Bonnie Raitt, Ryan Adams, David Wilcox, Brandi Carlile, and many more. It's clear when you listen to a playlist like this how important influences and inspiration are to the formation of artists like Taylor. But we have a lot more conversation to get to, so we're going to let the jukebox cool down for now. Thanks, Taylor, for this amazing list, and thanks Taylor's mom and dad for pouring so much great music into her so she can pour so much out into the world. And now, back to the front room with some more coffee and conversation with Taylor Leonhardt.
We watch as a boat sail down the coast line. I smile as your fingers find their way to mine. I am lost in a dream. Maybe, perhaps we're inside of a painting. Baby, you are Sunday in the park.
Tell me about the current project and how all of this has come to this culmination and where we're at right now.
Yeah. You know, I had done this album, River House, and it kind of had its own sound. My friend Jess produced that album, and it was so fun. We made it in her mom's spare bedroom, and it was just so this DIY vibe. And then over the years, I've been playing those songs, and I think I was just feeling this growing desire for my music to sound more like some of this music that I had just loved, like these records I listened to, like Raising Sand, you know, or Red Dirt Girl. This is what I keep coming back to, these albums. Really, I think I just want to make an Americana record. And really, that was less me going, I will do this, and more like I was writing songs, and they were starting to sound more and more like this stuff that had always been in me. And so I thought, okay, what would it look like to make a record that really like let these songs be, I think, what they're trying to be? And so I kind of found a producer, Lucas Morton, and yeah, made this whole plan. And I thought, okay, this album's going to come out in 2020, and here's the whole thing. And we're going to record it live. Like, we're going to, you know, we're going to get a band together. We're going to play these songs. And I really wanted the band to be a big part of the record and inform the way the track sounded, instead of here's your part and we'll layer it in. So we had this whole beautiful plan. And then, of course, as we were all surprised, then COVID-19 happened. And
But you actually got the band together and...
that's so true, yes.
You
So
got
we
a
did
studio?
start. We kind of said, you know, I did actually sort of like a private little Kickstarter to just get started. I was like, okay, I'm going to need to do a bigger crowdfunding campaign than I've done before. And so I want to show people what I'm doing. So in order to do that, I thought I'll get the band together to track a couple songs. We'll film it, we'll capture it, and then we can kind of share that with people and say, this is what it is, so that people could kind of understand that and feel like they could be a part of it from the beginning. We booked a couple days at Ocean Way, first in February 2020 and then in February 2021. And so there's this crazy year that happens between the beginning and then the second round. And, you know, I went into this project with this real kind of intense timeline and almost a sense of great urgency. Like, I've got to put a record out now. My last thing came out in 2017. And so, you know, let's move this along, people. And so that was the great joke of 2020 was like, I mean, you know, and I'm forced out of that. And I think, gosh, there's a lot of just tragedy of the past year. I think that there was a great gift in it for me of working within those great limitations. And the real joy was by the fall of 2020, we were able to run the Kickstarter that I was planning on running. And it was a crazy experience. And then when I got back with the band, February 2021, which is just a few months ago, you know, we're gathering the first morning at the studio, and I'm, you know, kind of thanking everyone for being there. And I just cry because I felt the whole weight of that year of not knowing, of what we'd all been through, of being separate and isolated and kind of going, will people make music again? Will we get together again? Will we, you know, like all of the pain of that kind of hit me in that moment. And then I'm looking around and I'm like, but like, we're back, we're together again. We are actually going to finish this project. And the truth is, like, I wrote most of the songs in the midst of the pandemic year. So it's crazy because I'm in no way would invite this kind of thing on the world. And there's been great loss in it. So I say this very carefully, but I am grateful for what I was able to mine, you know, out of that. And for these songs that came really at the right time. And that now we have this beautiful record that I think will speak to people right where they are. I just think people are carrying a lot of trauma and a lot of loss and a lot of grief and a lot of questions. And I am so glad that I feel like we made this record that really, like, it doesn't answer that question, but it speaks into it, and hopefully will bring comfort and make people feel less alone.
Many times have I promised to walk through the smoke and the fire with you. That was long before I ever knew the flame. Nothing, not this, not the thing that I cannot fix. The house is burning and I'm helpless, I'm helpless. And what do I do now? All the lights gone now. And what do I do now? All the lights gone out.
Usually there's one song that kind of comes first and makes you think there's a record here. And for me, it was the song Poetry. This song came before the pandemic, came before really I knew I was making an album. And tension is what makes music work. It's kind of what makes our lives work. In a poem, this space is just as important as the words. And with poetry, every word is on purpose. I mean, you think about the author, the poet, kind of sitting with this blank page going, what is the exact thing, to put here? And so I was thinking about this. There's actually from a scripture. It's from the book of Ephesians, and it says we are his. A lot of translations of the Bible say workmanship, but I had heard someone say one time that word workmanship is actually like this Greek word poema, and ask that question like, but what if we are the poetry of God? And so then it was so fun for me to imagine God, the poet, sitting back and creating us, and wondering about who we would be, and kind of just every word of who we are being something that's very intentional and delighted in and delighted over. And so I think here's really the song that I need in those moments in my life, because I think sometimes there's these, if we're a poem, there's a certain word in there or a space that feels like we don't like it, or it feels uncomfortable, or I feel like I'm in between stanzas right now. And I just, to kind of think like, okay, but what if the whole thing is telling a story? And what if that's not about usefulness or how good we are at something, but what if it's about being beautiful? What if it's about, so kind of just, I guess that it was one of those songs that sort of dropped into my heart a little bit. And I'm so glad as I continue to share that song, I think people find a home in it, because who can't relate to this waiting, and this kind of this tension of living in this world that is hard to do, and heartbreaking. And so I wanted to talk about what might be happening underground, kind of while we're waiting for the spring to come.
They're ready.
Okay, take 4.
Isn't it so hard for most of us to find the kind of patience that will trust the slow, steady work of God beneath the surface, every moment working for our good? 'Cause under all the snow is something great, hiding in the winter is a spring. I know it will take the barren field of heartbreak a little time for a new rain to fall. I will not hang my head, his banner is over me, and he said that I am his poetry. He won't waste a word. I'm gonna wait on the Lord.
So this Kickstarter goes through, and I'm like, whoa, this is crazy. And I'm so thankful, and we're going to make this record. And then I quickly realize it's October. It's November 2020, and I realize, oh, so I have to write songs now. And so I just go straight into kind of like songwriting mode, and man, put my head down and worked on that. And one of the fun things about this album, which I did not do on my last record, is I invited co-writers into this space. I'd always written Taylor Leonhardt songs, just me, just Taylor. And I thought I had really started to subscribe to this idea that inviting other people into the process can actually elevate what you're doing. And I mean, you do that carefully, and you think about who those people are. But one beautiful thing that's happened in my life over the last couple of years is that I've met incredible songwriters. So I was like, I have the opportunity to really work with my friends and invite them into my songs and make them better than they are. And so like in November, I called a friend of mine, Leslie Jordan, who's become a great friend to me, and almost, like she's just teaching me so much about how to use my voice and how to dig deep and how to really serve people with your songs. And I called Leslie and said, hey, I'd love to write with you for my album. And we get together, and I'd been reading Henry Nouwen, and this particular book, he's one of my favorite authors, and there's a particular book called The Inner Voice of Love. It's almost journal, like diary entries, and he's writing to himself. And so I'm reading this book last fall, and there's one passage that just kind of stuck with me, and I'd been kind of carrying it around with me for a while. And he talks about your interior life being like a castle. And if you imagine like a castle has a drawbridge that goes across a moat. And so many of us, he says, you just leave the bridge down, and anyone can come take whatever they want. And this is what it means to live a life with no boundaries. And that was something I was very much learning in some kind of difficult family relationships and personal relationships, was how do I take good care of myself? And is that okay to do? And so Leslie and I are just talking about this book. I didn't think necessarily, I'm going to write a song about this. I'm talking about this. I was like, I kind of have an idea for how you could maybe make a song out of or make some verses out of this image. And we just dive into it. And so we wrote the song. It's called The Bridge. And so I'm really excited about that one. And what Leslie was able to, I feel like, really draw out that day, and the way she was able to really help me tell that story. I just know, gosh, this song would not have happened without this year, without Henry Nouwen, without Leslie. And so I'm so excited for that one.
Taylor gave us something really special we are excited to share with you here. This is a simple acoustic work tape phone recording that captures the writing of The Bridge as it was first being created by Taylor and Leslie Jordan. You can hear the spots where the lyrics might not be fully fleshed out, or maybe they are still nailing down exactly how the melody will go. It's a rare glimpse into the writing process that few artists are willing to share. Let's take a listen.
Imagine a castle just beyond the walls. The river surrounds it, there's only one way across. I didn't see there was treasure laying right at my feet. For too long I left the door open and let in the thief. Some people take what you got till you got nothing to give. I could play the victim, but let's call the spade what it is. It's nobody's fault but my own. It's my hand on the switch, so I'm drawing the bridge. And I'm running right on the road. I'm learning like a light, even when I'm alone. Some people take what you got till you got nothing to give. And I could play the victim, but let's call a spade what it is. It's nobody's fault but my own. It's my hand on the switch.
Tell me a little bit about you as a collaborator and how that has evolved. And it seems like that has almost entirely been in this sort of sacred music space. How has that evolved and fit into your creative life as well?
I think a lot of that collaboration really has come out of this Mission House project that we started. And so, yeah, my friend Jess Ray, we were both kind of doing our independent solo stuff, but we're almost exactly the same age. We're both at the time living in Raleigh, North Carolina. So Jess and I, we're different. We have different personalities, but very kindred-hearted. And so we kind of became friends really fast. And it felt easy. I think to collaborate, sometimes you collaborate with people, you're like, we are really crossing a major hurdle to work with each other. And with Jess, it was like, it feels like we have been singing together for years or playing together. And it just was fun. It was so fun for both of us, I think. And so we, we're a part of this group of young adults that were just wanting to get together every week. And we were like, you know what? We're wanting to find a space together where we can really feel like that true sense of community and just to be known and loved. And so we started this thing on Monday nights, and we would make dinner, and then we would just sing songs together. And it just felt so sweet, and like there's so much friendship was born in that little room. And that room got bigger, and there were more and more people. It got a little bit like we're doing this every week, and there's a lot of people here. And as we got to know the people in this room, we realized like, okay, we're looking for the right songs, and we're kind of struggling to find them, and kind of going like, okay, these aren't fitting like what maybe I feel like we need to sing. And so Jess and I were having this sense of like, our friends need to sing this kind of song, and we can't find that song. So sometimes we would write one, or sometimes that night we would come up with like a little chorus idea to sing together. And so all of a sudden we had this pile of songs, sacred songs. And I would say the real distinction is there's sacred elements to the music we create individually, but the stuff we were writing together felt like it's meant to be really sung by a group of people. Right. We have this little pile of songs. Jess, who's like the ever visionary, says, let's record them so that our friends can listen to them whenever they want. So she just produces this whole little project, and we do that at her house. And then our friend Andrew Osenga rolls into town to play a show, and we take him out to dinner after the show, and he says, hey, I just got a job at A&R, being the new A&R guy at Integrity Music, and I'm kind of looking for people who are writing these sort of sacred songs for people to sing together, this kind of congregational stuff. And Jess and I look at each other like, do we tell him about this thing? So we do. We're like, well, actually, that's so funny that you asked that. Like, we do have a whole pile that we already produced. Like, they're here. You could listen to them. We send it along. We send him, like, kind of just little, like, videos of this community that we're a part of. And he's like, okay, well, like, this is something special. We're, like, thrilled to kind of partner with Integrity. But the funny part was we're, like, being offered a record deal, and we're not even a band really yet. We're two friends like writing these songs, so we had to make up a band name and make up a band basically to kind of carry this vision forward. And it was cool to sort of go, this was very much a thing that was born out of friendship, not something we were looking for. So that's just been a joy. And really through that, it has really led to a lot of these, I felt like music was so this thing I was doing by myself, or maybe doing with Jess kind of half the time. And now, because of our partnership with Integrity and all that stuff, and getting to come to Nashville all the time, it's like all of a sudden we met these incredible people making music, and my musical world just expanded and multiplied. And now I'm like, there are so many people at this table. Like, it's not just me kind of roughing it out there. It's like I just get to be a part of something that's already been going on, and I don't want to just write my songs. I would love to help other people write songs, and I'd love to see what happens when you get together.
Living water flowing from the heart of the Father. Jesus, we want your living water flowing from the heart of the Father. Jesus, we want your living water flowing from the heart of the Father.
you said you just recently moved here. You seemed to have cultivated some good community in Raleigh.
Yes.
With Jess and Krista. Now Krista moved here. So
Yes.
what was your thinking finally in moving here? And when someone asks you that question, what would you say about the transition and when is it time?
It was something I considered for years. And actually, I can be both impulsive and the slowest decision maker ever. And I think for something this big, and it speaks to how much I loved my life in Raleigh and still love those people in that place, that I knew I don't want to leave this on a whim. I want to have a vision really for what life in Nashville could look like if I'm really going to live there. Because I felt like I've got it too good here in North Carolina, and it's beautiful, and I have that kind of beloved community and friendship. So I think something that happened was when we started really coming to Nashville more, we'd set up rights with people, or we'd get invited to these kind of creative writing retreats and doing stuff like that. And I started just naturally kind of organically making friends here. And my work trips to Nashville felt very not like work to me. It felt like I'm getting to do the thing that I really love doing the most. And I'm meeting all these kinds of people that are just interesting and, sort of pursuing the kind of creative life that I really want. And, there's this kind of thing that you can feel here. And so it just felt like these are people I want to be around and learn from and just like spend time with. And so all of a sudden it was kind of like I was slowly building a community in another town.
Right.
It's almost as if I felt like if my life had a center of gravity, that center of gravity was shifting from North Carolina to Nashville almost before my address shifted. Mm-hmm. And I was finding myself coming 2 times a month, and just like how much can I be here? For me, I just came to the point where my eventually felt like I didn't want to wait anymore. If I felt like I knew that eventually I was going to need to catch up with my center of gravity, so why not do that now? Right. And I also felt like for me there was never going to be a day that just felt like this is the perfect time to move. And it's a huge risk. Right. And the humor of it all was like the time that I did pick to move was literally in the middle of a global pandemic. And it's a testament to my friends here, the friendliness and kind of invitational spirit of this town, that even in the midst of like a pretty crazy year, it's been wonderful to be here. And I felt like it's feeling like a place that I could really get used to.
Would you be well from crushing anxiety and live inside a peace you can't understand? Would you be free from all that entangles you? Trade what you couldn't do for all that I have.
As we were winding down, I remembered a story I recently heard Taylor share at a house concert she did in a backyard here in Nashville in conjunction with Under the Radar and the new Porchlight Network. She talked about having spent a summer studying French in Paris and what it taught her about the difference between learning a language and really understanding it. It seemed particularly relevant to the ongoing theme we have dialed in here about listening, so I asked her if she would share that story again here for us.
I studied French in high school, even though I grew up in Texas, where it would make a lot more sense to study Spanish. But I chose French just to be a little different and difficult, I guess. And I studied French, and then I went to college, and I kept going. I mean, I had no real plans with it, but I did love the language so much and some of the culture. And so I kept signing up for these advanced French classes, and I found out from my advisor that I was only maybe 6 credits shy of a French minor, which sounded kind of cool. But she said to do that, we would require students minoring to do a study abroad program, which you could do this summer. And so I am pumped about the thought of like going to a school in Paris and spending a summer there, and somehow talked my parents into, the whole thing. And at this point, I think I'd been taking 6 or 7 years of French classes. So I just think, oh, I have got this down, and I'm going to Paris. Like, this is going to be the best summer of my life. Like, I'm so ready for this. And I'm thinking, I'm going to be basically this like Belle from Beauty and the Beast, like walking through the cobblestone streets with like local school children following me around and just carrying like my fresh baguette from the bakery. And oh gosh, it's so embarrassing now to think about how overly confident I was. And then of course, so I go to Paris, and you go on this like really long flight that I couldn't sleep on, and so I just like stay up watching movies on this flight the whole time. And then I get there and I'm bleary-eyed and tired and navigating the Paris airport, and I get to this house where I'm gonna live for the summer, and it's just me and this kind of older woman who's taking me in for the summer. And I just remember putting my bags down, and she's so warm and kind, but she's talking to me in French, of course, very rapidly. and I sort of, even in my tiredness, I'm kind of listening to her, and that's when I realize I do not know. I can't make out what she's saying. I don't understand it. This language I've been studying for 7 years. Now someone's speaking to me, and I have no clue what she's saying. I mean, little words here and there, but really like the comprehension is not happening. And I'm like, oh no. Like, and now the summer is I'm just looking ahead at it like, well, what am I going to do? And it was a struggle. I mean, in my classes, in restaurants, like Paris, it moves fast, and some people do speak English to you, but I was constantly in this environment of people talking at me, talking around me, and me going, I do not belong here. I don't fit here. Like, I should be at home. And I thought, whoa, it is a crazy thing, language, and how much that is like the currency almost of relationship and connection. Really, we're all looking for people who speak our language, whether that's like English and French, or just like, gosh, I love reading these Wendell Berry novels. And then you meet someone else who reads the same kind of book that you do, and you're like, I thought I was the only one who was obsessed with this. And it's like that you too moment that C.S. Lewis talks about. And I think that's just what we're all so hungry for. So it took me kind of going across the world to kind of realize like, oh, that's what loneliness is. It's this feeling of like, I don't have a way to communicate with you, which means I don't have a way to connect with you and feel known and feel loved. So that has informed, that memory has informed so much of my songwriting and what I really hope to do as an artist, which is to like find that language for the people who are like, is there anyone who thinks like me? Is there anyone who's been through this kind of thing? And just to go, hey, I have, and I'm speaking your language. I almost see myself sometimes as a translator, because I feel at home, and I feel like I walk the middle road in so many ways. And I think so. Sometimes I'm listening to one person, I go, I think I know what you mean by that. You're saying this, I think I know what you really mean. Or over here, I'm hearing you say this, like on these two sides. And I almost sometimes want to go, I want to tell both people, like, if only you could hear that you're either you think you're saying the same thing and you're not, or you're actually saying two different things, or maybe you are. But I think one of my favorite questions has become, okay, when you use that word, like, what does that mean to you? And just really getting curious and listening to, like, because there's all this stuff, and I think we just define things so differently. But if we took time to go, well, tell me what you mean by that. Or, man, I'm curious about how you landed on that position. Like, maybe you could explain that to me, instead of assuming that we would know that, or that, right. I think this thought that runs through our minds so often is, well, how could this person think that way, vote for this person, believe this thing or not believe this thing, when really we are so informed by our stories, our experiences. If you take time to listen to that in another human being, you're going to walk away hopefully with a friend and more understanding.
That's going to do it for my conversation with Taylor for now, anyway. And I feel like we covered a lot of what I would normally say at the end of an episode through this conversation, but I'll go ahead and pull my soapbox out for just a couple of minutes here and share something I found recently when reading through a collection of works by the novelist Flannery O'Connor. O'Connor, who is often referred to as a master of the Southern Gothic genre, was known as an artist who allowed her faith to profoundly inform her work without it ever limiting who she was able to reach, and her commitment to stare unflinchingly into some of the darkest and seemingly ugliest aspects of the human soul is what gives her work such resonance, potency, and I believe longevity. The following is an excerpt from an essay called The Regional Writer, which was originally published in 1963, about a year before O'Connor died of lupus at just 39 years old. Although throughout this piece she is referring to novelists, everything she says seems perfectly applicable to songwriters, as far as I'm concerned. She may be talking about Southerners and novelists, but the beauty and importance of location, dialect, and all of the unique things that make this place distinct from that place, and some of the myths we attach to the creative personality that, well, I think I can relate to in several different ways. Here, let me dive right in. From The Regional Writer by Flannery O'Connor. Fortunately, the Georgia writer's work often belongs in that larger and more meaningful category, Southern literature, and it is really about that I have a word to say. There is one myth about writers that I have always felt was particularly pernicious and untruthful, the myth of the, quote, lonely writer, end quote, the myth that writing is a lonely occupation involving much suffering because supposedly the writer exists in a state of sensitivity which cuts him off or raises him above or casts him below the community around him. This is a common cliche, a hangover probably from the Romantic period and the idea of the artist as a sufferer and rebel. Probably any of the arts that are not performed in a chorus line are going to come in for a certain amount of romanticizing, but it seems to me particularly bad to do this to writers, and especially fiction writers, because fiction writers engage in the homeliest and most concrete and most unromanticizable of all arts. I suppose there have been enough genuinely lonely, suffering novelists to make this seem a reasonable myth, but there is every reason to suppose that such cases are the rest of less admirable qualities in these writers, qualities which have nothing to do with the vocation of writing itself. Unless the novelist has gone utterly out of his mind, his aim is still communication, and communication suggests talking inside a community. One of the reasons Southern fiction thrives is that our best writers are able to do this. They are not alienated. They are not lonely, suffering artists grasping for purer air. The Southern writer apparently feels the need of expatriation less than other writers in this country. Moreover, when he does leave and stay gone, he does so at great peril and observation, which is so necessary to maintain if fiction is to be true. The isolated imagination is easily corrupted by theory, but the writer inside his community seldom has such a problem. Again, a reading from The Regional Writer by Flannery O'Connor from 1963. Though not always, creativity usually involves the production of something that we hope someone else will experience. It's in that dynamic that art, be it a novel or a song or a painting, becomes part of the fabric of community. And even as we find ourselves increasingly able to consume creative products individually, let's not forget that the essence of this stuff, maybe even the mystical purpose for which it was created, is to draw us out of ourselves and into each other's space, experiences, and lives. I'm so grateful for artists like Taylor who inspire me to listen better and to create with an audience in mind, and for authors like Flannery O'Connor who stared down the darkness until the beauty emerged and inspired generations as a result. I can't even imagine what the Americana music scene of the last 30 years would sound like, or if there would even have been such a scene without the words her heart put into the world through such suffering, weakness, and pain. All right, I'm climbing off my soapbox now. That's going to do it for this episode of the podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Please tell your friends about the show. Please subscribe to our email list for a chance to win our big prize pack and to keep up with the goings-on around here. And give us a good rating and review at Apple Podcasts and wherever else you can. Come join me and see Taylor along with Jars of Clay, Royce Lovett, Sandra McCracken, and many more at the White Owl Festival here in Tennessee this Memorial Day weekend. If you win the big prize pack, you could be going for free. You can find links to Taylor's music and a complete list of all the music you heard on this episode on the show notes page at truetunes.com. You can also find a link to visiontrust.org so you can join us in sponsoring a child and changing their world. It's all there at truetunes.com. A big thanks, as always, to my co-producer and engineer, Bruce A. Brown, and to Phil Keggy and Rex Paul for our theme song, Full Circle. The contents of the podcast are protected by U.S. copyright law and are the intellectual property of Gyroscope Productions, with the exception of songs or clips that are from previously copywritten material. Everything on this episode is used by permission or under fair use provisions. This program is intended for the private use of our listening audience. Gyroscope Productions can be reached at jjt@truetunes.com or P.O. Box 60401, Nashville, Tennessee 37206. Until next time, this is JJT inviting you to dig deep, listen hard, love well, stay tuned, and stay true.
Everyone's out. So it's just you and me.
And Bruce.